What's up, YouTube? This is Guy, and today on the review table we have a Seiko watch. And I am definitely a little bit late on getting this to the review table because this watch has already been discontinued. Of course, it's been on the market for quite a while now, so I don't mean to imply that it was only available for a short period of time. It's just that it would have been nice to get this review out while the watch was still in production. That said, it is on loan from a viewer, and it is sort of a cult classic, or it will most certainly be a cult classic in the future. And yeah, I thought it would be a cool watch to show you guys and do a little review of. It is the Seiko SARB065, often referred to as the Cocktail Time. When it was available, prior to being discounted, you could find these watches for maybe between $400 and $500. They are JDM, Japanese Domestic Market watches, so you had to order them from overseas or get them from a local retailer, if you're in the United States like I am, that did deal in JDM watches, so that tended to make them a little bit more expensive and harder to find. But yeah, now you're going to have a real hard time finding them. They were, however, replaced recently. I believe in the most recent Bezel World 2017, Seiko announced that they replaced them with several models that have striking similarities to this watch. The two most notable are the SRPB43 and the SSA343. Now, the SRPB43 is a very, very close copy of this watch, but it has the Presage branding on the dial. The SSA343 has a very, very similar look, but it has a power reserve indicator, and the date complication is on a sub-dial as opposed to being at the 3 o'clock position in a date window. That said, there are some other differences between the new Presage models and this classic Cocktail Time, and I think that's what is going to keep this Cocktail Time, the original, sort of always on the mind of collectors. First things first, the dimensions are a little bit different. I'm not going to quote the differences because I'm not 100% sure what they all are, but dimensions aren't identical. The crown on the new ones, in pictures anyway, to me it looks like it's a little bit oversized compared to the crown that we find on this SARB065 model. And most notably, the new models use 4R series movements, which is a de facto downgrade, in my opinion. The movement in this Cocktail Time SARB065 is a 6R15, and for whatever reason, they decided to go with a less features, less high quality, I don't know how I'd want to describe it, but a lesser movement. The 4R, I don't know if it's the 4R36 or some other designation. I suppose it would be for the one with the power reserve and the sub-dial for the date. It's certainly not a 4R36, but regardless, it's in the 4R family. Those 4R movements, you don't get the same kind of power reserve out of the box. You don't get the same kind of specifications as far as accuracy from the factory. I just think it's not quite as nice of a movement as the 6R15. So that's where we're at. We are going to check out this watch on the table, tell you everything about that, but keep in mind that if you want to find it, you're looking on the secondary used market, or you're going to adopt one of the new Presage watches. Now, first things first, I always like to cover the basic specifications on a watch when I'm reviewing them. That will be no different here. We have a case diameter of 40 millimeters. We have a lug width of 20 millimeters. The thickness on this watch is at 13 millimeters, which is a little bit thick for a dress watch, and this is, without a doubt, a very classy dress watch. And lug to lug, from the very top to the very bottom lugs, or what I have often referred to as a watch's wingspan, comes in at 47 millimeters. This watch has a 50 meter water resistance rating. The crystal covering the dial is a Hardlex crystal, but it is domed, very, very noticeably domed. And when we look closer at the watch in a couple minutes, we'll check all of this stuff out closely. Like I had previously mentioned, we have a date at the 3 o'clock position. Screw down case back with exhibition window. This comes on a black leather strap with a butterfly deployant clasp, and as you can see on the table, it's currently wearing a brown leather strap. There's a good reason for that. The black leather strap is not very good, but I will show it to you guys briefly. And last but not least, when we talk about features, the main feature of this watch, the thing that everybody is attracted to it for, is the beautiful radiant sunburst white dial. We'll cover the movement quickly. I'm not going to tell you a whole lot of information about it. I will show you the back. I'm going to slide this off the table. It is the SRPB43 movement, and you can see it here in the exhibition case window. This movement is a 23 jewel movement with hand winding and hacking. It sports a 50-hour power reserve. It's got an advertised specification for accuracy of -15 seconds per day to as much as 25 seconds per day, and it runs at a beat rate or vibrations per hour of 21,600. Nothing particularly fancy or attractive about the movement. It's not really decorated or anything, but we do have, again, this exhibition case back to, show it off, I guess, if you want to. That's really all I'm going to cover about the movement. It's not a particularly interesting topic, but I do want to give you the basic information about it. First thing I do want to cover in regard to this watch is the strap. So, as you can see, this watch is currently wearing a brown leather strap. It is on loan, like I previously mentioned, from a viewer, and this viewer often sends me watches not on the original straps because he is, he's a strap monster. He just loves changing stuff out. In this case, I think it was a good idea to change out the strap, although I don't know if I like it on this specific brown leather strap that he's using. If you're curious, this brown leather strap that the watch is currently on is a leather Horween by the Weiss company. So, if you love this strap, brown leather with sort of a off-white contrast stitching, that's what it is. But the strap that this watch comes on by default can be found right here. Of course, we still got the hang tags attached. I don't believe he's ever even used this strap. There's the hang tag, SARB065, with all the Japanese writing. There's things about this strap that I do like, and things about this strap that I don't like. Number one, the blue contrast stitching, kind of a nice touch because there is a highlight of blue on the dial, and specifically on the second hand, which I'll show you later. So that it has this blue contrast stitching on the strap is pretty cool. But the strap in every other regard is pretty low quality. First thing, it has this padding in between the layers of the leather. I'm never really a big fan of that, so it kind of tapers down right there. Number two, it's super high gloss, as you can probably see the light reflecting off of my studio lights. It's super high gloss, very, very thin. The lining on it, it's okay. It feels like it would be very comfortable, actually, if I'm being honest. But overall, it's mostly a fail. And obviously, I don't blame him for taking the watch off of this strap. Now, if you notice this strap doesn't have a buckle, that's because he stole the buckle off of this strap for some other watch. It's a nice buckle, though, and I'm going to show it to you because I have this watch on the table, the SARG011, and it uses the same buckle. The strap on this watch is actually pretty okay. They're not identical, but the buckle is identical. It's a dual button deployant butterfly clasp, so you push those two buttons, folds open. The swing arm is pretty decent material, and the clasp end is nice brushed finish with the Seiko branding logo there. So yeah, that's the buckle that would come on the Cocktail Time strap if my friend didn't cannibalize it off it and use it for some other project. So keep that in mind. So yeah, there we have it. That's the strap that this watch comes on. I mean, you could wear it. It's probably wearable, but not high quality whatsoever. So if you were to get this watch, expect that you're probably going to want to have to change out the strap. That said, my friend did put it on this brown leather strap. I think it really needs to be on a black strap, or maybe a very, very dark navy blue strap. That might work too. But it's not awful. It's not like I couldn't wear it on this brown leather strap. It's just not my favorite choice. I don't know, here's an option. grab it off of my table over here to my side. This is a strap by Clockwork Synergies. It has the built-in retractable spring bars. I would like to see it on this strap, actually. I'm not going to throw it on there, but I think that that would be a nice look. Just a nice, thick, solid dress, black leather. You know, that's just my 2 cents on how I would dress it up if it were my watch in my collection. So moving along, next let's talk about the design, the features, the functionality, the quality, all of the normal stuff that I discussed. I'm going to zoom the camera in so that we can get a closer look at this gorgeous dial and the case and talk in more depth about it. One sec. So here we have the close-up of the SARB065 cocktail time. First thing that strikes everybody, I'm sure, about this watch is this absolutely beautiful dial. But before we talk about that dial, and you're probably not going to be able to take your eyes off of it, let's talk about the case. We did say that the case was 40 millimeters in diameter with 20 millimeter lugs, a thickness of about 13 millimeters, and it's pretty thick, and an overall lug-to-lug width from top to bottom of 47 millimeters. In every regard, this case is just a little bit oversized. The whole watch, just a little bit oversized. And here's part of the reason. The lugs on this watch are very delicate. They're, I don't know, kind of thin. And what it does, I'm going to give it a little wipe here because nobody wants to look at dust and fingerprints on a watch that I'm reviewing. Since these lugs are sort of thin and sort of delicate, and the dial is sort of large and prominent, the bezel is very small, it just makes everything about it feel large to me. Now, of course, you may think that it's the perfect size, and you're entitled to that opinion. But in my opinion, that is about, aside from the strap, about the only negative. I wish that if it was going to keep these thin, delicate lugs, it would have had a slightly reduced case. Just a little bit, maybe a millimeter or two, nothing crazy. Because it just presents large. It's bold, and maybe it's supposed to be. Maybe it should be bold and flashy. It presents that way without a doubt because of the dimensions and the proportions. But if you like that thin, delicate lugs with the very, very large prominent dial and the sort of, again, delicate bezel, maybe this is absolutely perfect for you. I do like it quite a bit. I think that it's gorgeous, don't get me wrong. But I can't say everything is always perfect in every single video. I have to be honest and give my opinions. That's what I'm here for. Now, the finishing on this case is excellent. Everything is polished. I don't think there's even a stroke of a brushed finish anywhere on it. The polishing, however, isn't like super high quality luxury polishing. It's a little distorted. It's not like perfectly mirrored polish, but it's decent. I think you find a lot of watches at around the 200 price point that have this same quality of polishing though, and there's quite a big difference in price between that and this. I mean, when this was available, you know, $400 to $500 was common. I suspect that the new models that are coming out are going to be in that same price ballpark wise, and if they have the same exact quality of polishing on the finish, it's just a little bit lackluster. Not terrible. I'd like to just see it a little less, I don't know, distorted. Again, if we're going to have sort of a mirrored finish, I'm trying to like catch some reflections in it. You know, I've just seen better, I guess is my point. The top of the lugs, they're polished as well. The whole thing, it's all polished. The bezel, again, it's kind of, it's a smooth, fixed bezel, but it's a little small and delicate, and it's got kind of a strong slope to it. I guess that's how I would describe it. So you don't pick up as much reflection off of that when you're looking down at it on your wrist. It kind of reflects away, and it really drills your eye into the dial itself. So that's kind of a good idea as far as attracting attention where the attention is due. You know what I'm saying? What else can we talk about here? The crown on this guy, since we're in the ballpark of the case, it is a signed crown. It's small. It works quite well. You can get a good grip for hand winding the movement. Of course, like I had said, oh, here's an interesting thing. If we look at the side of the case, and I'm going to zoom in real close here, there's a little divot there. I suspect that that's there so you can kind of get your fingernail underneath there to pull the crown out. Other than that, this case is a very, very simple, plain design. There's nothing flashy about the case. It's not beveled edges all over the place and different types of finishings in different spots. It's quite simple. Again, I think it's to attract all of the attention to the beautiful dial. But again, you can pull the crown out to the first position to quick set the date if we wanted to, pull it out to the second position to hack the movement, and set the time. The time is very, very, very precise to set. I always get annoyed with watches where when you're moving the hands and then you release it, and the time or the hand kind of just wobbles back and forth a little bit, it makes it difficult to set it precisely. This one sets very, very precisely. There's no problems with that whatsoever. So yeah, that's the crown. And the last thing to talk about on the case is the case back, which I kind of gave you a quick look at when we were talking about the movement. It's also polished, branded with the Seiko information. Nothing super special there, but another piece of polished hardware on this watch, although the polishing on the case back looks a little bit almost better than the size of the case. If I'm being honest, I can see the reflections and it's less distorted there. It's kind of interesting. But yeah, overall, the finishing is pretty good. I think that, again, I've seen this quality of finishing in cheaper watches, and I guess that's my only complaint, is that considering it's maybe double the price of watches that have similar finished and polishing surfaces rather, that's maybe slightly a negative, but nothing to write home about. Next thing to talk about is going to be the dial, the handsets, the presentation, the thing that draws everybody to this watch. First things first, you have this absolutely beautiful, radiant, sunburst white dial. It's fantastic. It's what everybody loves about this watch. I'm no exception to that. As I rotate it around, just to give you guys a close look at how it picks up and reflects light, it is absolutely amazing. This is, I don't know, maybe one of the nicest looking, at least dials on a dress watch that I've ever encountered. It's certainly flashy, it's certainly bold, but looks absolutely fantastic. Now the handset on this is sword style hands. You can see that there is like a leading edge and a rear edge. There's a bevel on them. Reflects light depending on the angle of the attack of the light on them. That's really, really cool. And the nice touch to it I had alluded to earlier. I don't know how well it's going to show up on my camera, but that second hand has got a dark blue finish, and it looks really, really nice. That's why I think it might set this watch off nicely to put it on a very dark blue leather strap, but it would look fine on black as well. Looks like we might have a little bit of dust there. Yeah, wipe that off. Now the crystal is again a Hardlex crystal, and I had mentioned it's domed, and as I kind of rotate the watch here, you're going to see how domed that crystal really is. Everything sort of starts to distort as I rotate it there. And then you see that big, tall, domed crystal. I really like dome crystals on dress watches. The Orient Bambino, previously reviewed on this channel. I was crazy about that crystal on that watch and the way that it presented the dial. Super impressed with it. I think that I know some people have complained that it makes it a lot thicker than it needs to be. I don't mind it at all. Matter of fact, I welcome it. I think it looks awesome. The markers on the dial are all very nicely polished stainless steel applied markers. The markers at the 6, 9, and 12 are sort of embellished or a little bit bigger overall than the markers at the other positions. And you can see that there's actually 2 markers. If we look at the 5 o'clock position there's sort of a squarish pip and then a subdued triangle, and then over at the 6 o'clock we have a much more prominent, almost like an arrowhead triangular marker. Very, very cool looking. Like that quite a bit. At the 3 o'clock position, of course, we have a date window, and it is framed in a very nice stainless steel frame. It almost looks like the bevel on that frame is brushed on the inner edge, but polished on the top side. Very well done. A lot of attention to detail went into this watch, and that's really pretty common for Seiko's JDM watches. They almost always, in my opinion, come off looking like a little bit higher quality than the watches that they put out to the general population, the rest of the world. Quality on this thing, no exception, looks fantastic. You know, I think about my old SARB033 that I previously reviewed. I get that same kind of feeling. Everything's just a step above. Of course, this isn't a luxury watch per se. You know, it's an affordable watch. It's the upper end maybe of affordable wristwatches, but it's got certainly a flavor of luxury to it, just because everything's done pretty nicely for the price point. Despite my mild complaint about the polishing not being super mirrored high quality, there's a whole lot going on here, a whole lot of good going on here. This dial does have a chapter ring, and it's got this very intricate track for the milliseconds. So, you know, we have all of the main minute or second hash marks, and then this very fine little hash marks for it's probably every 5th or every 6th second. The interesting thing, I see a lot of watches with this style of chapter ring, but they also have like the, you know, the 40, the 45, the numbers at the very edge of it. I'm glad they didn't put any sort of Arabic numerals there. Just keep it nice and subdued like that. That looks good. It might even be fine without a chapter ring at all, honestly, since it's a dress watch, but it does aid in your ability to precisely set to the minute when you are setting the time, and I always like that. I like having a nice precise chapter ring for that. That said, the handset, it doesn't, the second hand almost reaches all the way out to the chapter ring. You can see there's a very small gap between the second hand and the hash marks, the main hash marks for each second or minute. But the hour hand, it's quite a bit a ways from the chapter ring. It's fine. It's just, you know, if you're trying to set it really precisely, it might make it slightly more difficult because the minute hand doesn't reach out a little bit further. But yeah, again, not a complaint, just observations that I've made that I like to point out as I'm doing these reviews. That's something that I noticed. The other thing about the dial, we do have an applied Seiko logo. Try to give you a nice close-up of that. When the light catches it, it sort of casts a drop shadow. Looks very good. And then down at the 6 o'clock side, automatic 23 jewels. At the very bottom, we have the Japan 6R1501, I don't know what that says, 01G1, 0101, R2. Very tiny printing. But yeah, that's everything that you're going to find on this dial. Overall, you know, obviously I like this watch. I'm impressed with it. I do have a few minor complaints. The sizing, dimensions, not necessarily the exact size, but the dimensions of the watch, the proportions. It could be a little bit different. You could shrink down the case and the dial slightly so that it better matches these very delicate lugs. It's okay the way it is, don't get me wrong, but I prefer a little bit smaller of a wristwatch. Case in point, here's an old vintage Seiko that I have. It's a 36 millimeter, and I love it. It's probably from the 80s. That's sort of where I've been lately, is looking for smaller watches. I will go ahead and give you a wrist shot of this watch, so give me a second to get this Seiko off and throw the cocktail time on to show you what I'm talking about. Maybe I'll set these side by side real quick, give you a look at the different sizes. So that dual tone Seiko there, that's a 36 as opposed to the 40 of the cocktail time. It's a pretty big difference. I like stuff a little bit smaller and refined. That's just me though. So I'll throw this on and give you guys a wrist shot in 1 second. Alright guys, there it is, the SARB SARB065 cocktail time on my roughly 7-inch wrist. Of course it works fine, 40 millimeters isn't too big for me. Again, it's just very bold. It stands out because of the proportions, and I'd tone it down a hair if it were my choice to design this thing. But fantastic, beautiful watch. It's a shame that they discontinued it. I can't believe it, although they did replace it with some Presage lines, with some watches in the Presage line. But I don't know. I think if everything is the same, you know, in dimensions for the most part, I think I would go for this classic one over those if it were me, just to get the better movement. Looks pretty good, I'm not gonna lie. It does look very nice. Alright guys, I appreciate you tuning in, checking out the video, the review. As always, I will throw the links to all of my social media down in the notes description section of this video if you want to hook up with me on any of those sites. And I will be back probably, I'm trying to get onto a pattern of doing either a video on Tuesday and Thursday or just one video on Wednesday. So it'll be like maybe twice a week, 1 week, once a week the next week, something like that. That would be my optimum goal. So maybe Thursday, maybe I'll get this out on Tuesday, and maybe Thursday I'll have another video. We'll see. It's difficult to keep up with everything. But nevertheless, keep an eye out for more review videos from me, Guy, at the JustBlueFish channel. Bye now.